page. Today, I'd like to share another variation on the Lila sewing pattern, which, by the way, is already a mini class in fitting and pattern design. Not only will you get the sewing pattern, you'll also get video tutorials on fitting the pattern and several design projects that will show you how to take the pattern even further. In this week's tutorial, I'm showing you how to alter the Lila top for a tie front hem. I'm Alexandra Morgan from In-House Patterns and In-House Pattern Studio. I teach pattern making and fitting to people who love to sew. You'll find loads of pattern making and fitting tutorials at inhousepatternstudio.com that will elevate your sewing. Let me show you how I altered the Lila pattern to create this tie front detail. The pattern we're starting with is the In-House Patterns Lila top, and this is the base pattern for the Lila top. It has two views, both have sort of a twist detail in the pattern. But the great thing about the Lila pattern is that I've included design projects that will actually take this pattern even further. And one of them is this flutter sleeve top. So inside the pattern, you'll also get tutorials on how to fit it, how to change certain styling, and how to change different styling features of the pattern in order to create new variations on the style. And one of them is this flutter sleeve. Now, the base pattern is available in two sizing categories, sizes 2 to 14 with a B bust cup size and sizes 12 to 24 with a C bust cup size. So you do have those options there. Both are included when you purchase the pattern or the little mini class, as I call it. Now we're going to start with this particular one, assuming that you've gone through the entire fitting process. And as I said, this one has a flutter sleeve. But what I wanted to do was change this detailing here, which is sort of like a twist in the hem with a hem band, to just a tie front. And this is how it ended up looking. There's no band at the bottom, and I've just used this twist tie effect as ties for the bottom edge. So when I open it up, you'll likely be able to see that it is really just a simple variation on the top. There is a very special way that I have kind of decided to make this tie. I'm incorporating that pleat that's actually in the front of the pattern here into the tie effect. Again, eliminating the band and just having a 1/4 inch top stitch hem. Here's a really quick look at the original pattern. And as I said, it does have a back yoke attached, but I do have a tutorial inside the lessons in the Lila sewing pattern that will help you eliminate that seam if you don't want it. It's really quite a nice feature, but if you don't want it there is a way to remove it, and I show that to you. I wanted to point out here on the Lila pattern is that the balance lines are already included on the sewing pattern. So it's for each size. I will show you where all the balance lines are. This happens to be the across back. This is the back bust level. The waist level is here. And this is just above the high hip level. And then of course there's a band that is normally attached to this in the original pattern. We're not going to use that band in this example, so I've just left it off. Here's the front pattern piece, and I'll sort of flip it around a little bit for you. You can see here again the balance lines are represented on the pattern, and I even got some of the styling lines that are going to help you, enable you to remove this styling detail if you want. I show you how to eliminate the bust dart in this particular little mini class. So there's lots of ways that I show you how to make variations on the top that might suit you better or that you might be a little bit more attuned to create. Now, the section here of the front pattern piece, this is part of the band. So this is the twist and part of the band that goes at the front. But we are going to use this particular area of the pattern to create that tie front detail. So we're not going to make any really major changes to this pattern, but we're going to add a little bit more seam allowance around the center front and the hem. And we're also going to reshape this extension, which was the band, but we're going to create this into a tie. My first step is going to be the most simple one, which is to add some extra seam allowance at the bottom of this back pattern piece. The seam allowance here is actually going to become the hem allowance for the back. So we're just going to insert some paper here so that we can add a little bit of extra hem allowance. Now, once we have that, what I'm going to do is add that extra hem allowance. Now, the hem allowance we're going to use is 5/8 of an inch. This is going to allow enough fabric in order to create a 1/4" rolled hem. It's always good practice to double check your hem turn allowance. So what I like to do is fold the hem allowance up to make sure that my hem is going to work really well when I finally do turn it up in the fabric. So just folding it along what is now going to be the hem line. Just being careful that it's actually folding on that line. And then I want to make sure that I trace through this end here so that it looks somewhat similar to what's going to be up here once you turn the hem up. So just checking this here, I can actually trim that little section away. And this will give me the corner edge of what this hem allowance is going to be when it's turned up. And just cutting away the excess paper. On the front pattern piece, we are going to add extra seam allowances at center front and of course at the front hem, because we want to make sure the hem allowance is the same at the front as it was at the back. We can also add more seam allowance to this tie area as well, just simply because all of these sort of run in together. So I'm going to add some paper along the edges here so that we can add that seam allowance. So I've added in some extra paper here to add some extra seam and hem allowance. So what I'm going to do here at the bottom of the front pattern piece is add 5/8 of an inch. So I'm actually adding a 1/4 inch to the existing seam allowance, so I get a 5/8 of an inch hem allowance at the bottom of the front pattern piece, which is also going to match what I did at the back. Now because the hemline and the tie are sort of running in together, it's probably safest and easiest if you also add that same 5/8 of an inch to the seam allowance here at the tie as well. Now, this means, of course, we are just adding a 1/4 inch to the existing seam allowance, but I'm always measuring from the seam line. So from the seam line, you're measuring out 5/8 of an inch. And we're just going to extend that out because we're going to work on what I've kind of slightly drafted here already. So this is my new cut line for the bottom edge of the top. We're going to do the same thing to the front. Now the front needs extra seam allowance more than what the original pattern has, simply because I am going to be creating a little opening here at the bottom to give room to create the knot. So this gives a little bit of room here for the twist in the original styling. This is going to help with the tie as well, but we need even more space in order to actually create the tie. So we need about 5/8 of an inch seam allowance here on this side as well. So I'm measuring from the seam line, which is marked on the pattern, and I'm just stepping that out so that I have 5/8 of an inch seam allowance instead of 3/8, which is on the original pattern. Now again, because it runs into the tie here, or what we're going to create in a tie, I'm going to just extend that to this side of the tie as well, going all the way down. You do want to make sure that you extend this. You are going to have to sort of do a pivot here at this point, so that notch is still valid here. And you also want to extend your notches here to the cut line here as well. This marks the bust line here, and this marks the waistline here. I'm just going to extend this out perpendicular at the center front neckline here. And you know that we also need to turn the hem in order to get this corner of the hem to kind of work properly. So I'll do that off camera, and then we're going to quickly talk about how to kind of draft out this tie area. You can see I've added here the extra seam allowances I need at center front, and I've just extended that over to the tie here. I've also added the hem allowance here to be 5/8 of an inch at the bottom edge of the front, which also matches what we did at the back. I'm going to also add that little notch here for the hem allowance marking as well here. And we already talked about these notches here. This is going to be sort of where the tie will be actually stitched together on either side. Let's draft out the tie here though first. So when I made my personal tie, the one that I just showed you a little bit earlier, I measured out 8 inches from this line here. So 8 inches was the point of where my tie point was going to be. And then all I simply did is I took my curved ruler and I found a really nice smooth shape that went to this 0 point at the fold line here of the tie. So I'm extending it from approximately this notch here that's on the original pattern and just drawing it out to this seam line. And you'll notice that I'm going from seam line here. I want to make sure that I'm always working with my seam lines first, and then I will always adopt my cut lines from that seam line. Now, in order to get the other side of the tie, it has to be symmetrical in this circumstance. So what I like to do with that is I simply fold this tie in half, which I know is how I'm going to construct it. And I'm simply going to use a serrated tracing wheel, and I'm going to copy that line onto the other side. So it's a matter of using your tracing wheel, pressing through as hard as you need to in order to get the perforations to show on the other side. And I already had done that, and there is a little line there already, and I'm just going to outline that. The other thing that you could do to get that other line, if you know where your line is starting from and going to, you can use the numbers on the curve to help you get exactly the same curve on the other side. I rarely remember to do that the first time around, so I always miss that. So again, once you get those perforated markings on the paper, which you probably can't see here, you can simply trace through and get the other side so that each of these sides are symmetrical. Now, originally I thought I was going to stick with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, but since we're making it 5/8, I need to actually create a seam allowance here of 5/8 of an inch, not the original 3/8 I had drafted in there. And I'm just rocking my ruler along the seam line so that I can get my cut line for that curve. And there we have it. So now I can cut away this excess part of what used to be the band and has now become the tie. Now, we've actually completed the pattern work, but I want you to sort of recognize where you're going to be actually stitching this tie through. So as I mentioned, we're going to leave a gap here that goes from waist to this point here. So we can actually add a little dot here to make sure that you stop sewing at this point. This is the center front seam, which is going to be stitched closed. We're going to leave this section open, and we're going to turn it back 1/4 of an inch double, so that we have a little top stitched area that's open. And we are actually going to stitch this tie closed like this from that dot all the way through here. So that we'll end up with this sort of pleat style still happening within the garment, but you'll have a tie attached instead. You're going to do a 1/4 inch hem allowance here, so 1/4 double turn hem here, which is going to match the back. I'll show you the final garment, so maybe you might get a little bit better idea of how to construct it. But that's basically all the pattern work done. We've got a dot here, a notch here to indicate where you're going to stop sewing. This is where you're going to start stitching the tie together, these 2 dots here. So this is going to create the clean finished tie, and then you're going to double turn this area. So this is why I was saying that these notches are going to be helpful in order for you to turn these particular areas. And this notch 2 here, which matches the back, is just marking your hem allowance guideline. Now, of course, you can definitely keep these notches here as well, just extend them out to your new seam allowance. And if you do need to trim this part of the seam allowance off in this area for the tie, that's absolutely possible for you to do. I actually stitched this up with the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, but it does get a little bit tricky here to double turn this particular area, which is why I thought I'd give you the 5/8 of an inch option for this kind of extra seam allowance around the tie and the center front. So here are what the ties look like when they're stitched. You can see that I have actually clean finished them, so I've joined the 2 sides of the ties together to create this kind of shape. So you'll see this is sort of half the tie area here. Of course, the other side is done the same. I have created a little slit here by double turning this area between the waistline marking and that notch that indicated the tie. So there's a little double turn hem here. Mine's only 1/8 of an inch because I only had 3/8 of an inch to work with. Here's my top stitched hem, which is just a 1/4 inch top stitch hem, which I recognize is probably very difficult to see on this print, but trust me, that's exactly how it's finished all the way around, front to back. So again, this is just a really cute way of creating a tie front with the existing pattern style. Here is that triangular pleat here that is creating this really nice tie front that actually accommodates some bust fitting. As I mentioned, this particular style that I created, I've removed the yoke, so you'll have a tutorial for that inside the Lila sewing pattern. I've actually also removed the bust dart, and there's also a tutorial inside the little mini chorus that will help you do that as well. The flutter sleeve is also included with the pattern purchase, the little videos that show you how to do that. Again, just 1/4 inch rolled hem here at the sleeves. So a really cute little top, really great for summer. I hope you give it a try. Let me show you the final results. This version of the Lila top features the flutter sleeve, which just happens to be one of the design project tutorials included with your pattern mini class purchase. If you want to make one of your own, I'll leave links to the Lila sewing pattern on this page. I hope you're starting to see what a superpower pattern design skills can be. With just a few basic skills, you can create virtually any garment you desire using sewing patterns that you've already fit to your personal body measurements and shape. If you'd like to master these skills, dive into all the tutorials on my website, inhousepatternstudio.com. You'll be so glad you did. Did you enjoy this video? If you'd like to see more like this, let me know. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel, message me via email at alexandra@inhousepatterns.com, or visit me on Instagram at inhousepatterns. When you comment, like, follow, and share on these platforms, you'll get more of what you love in your feed and help others to find the content too. I'll chat with you soon. Bye for now.